Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis just got embarrassed as she's been handed a massive defeat, folks. Calls for Fani Willis's resignation and disbarment have echoed loudly with critics. Many are questioning her ethics and professionalism, as some are saying that she's in Trump's Georgia case for the clout. However, the recent ruling from the Supreme Court could possibly end her 15 minutes of fame. That and possibly even her career. The Georgia RICO racketeering case against former President Donald Trump is at risk of getting thrown out, with the Supreme Court ruling that he had some immunity prior to him leaving the White House as commander-in-chief. Willis is already facing a possible removal from the case due to her unprofessionalism and alleged lies while on the stand regarding her ex-lover Nathan Wade. It's also on pause at the moment, which is further creating problems for the district attorney. Critics have called out the likes of Willis, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and even Jack Smith, all for going after Donald Trump while he's campaigning for the White House.
All right, let's talk politics. 27 minutes after the hour. This morning, growing anticipation over who Donald Trump will pick as a running mate. Here is what he told me.
We have, as they say, a deep bench, but Marco was great last night, very popular. And he's certainly one of the people that we're looking at.
Right, you got J.D. Vance, who's going with Governor Burgum in North Dakota. And then you have Tim Scott. Those are the four finalists. Should I expand that at all?
Well, you could. I think I'm pretty well set in my own mind. But, you got some good people. And I have changed a little bit. But they're all great. Anyone would be fantastic. Anyone would be a lot better than laughing Kamala.
Well, look, this is The Apprentice, Donald Trump running mate edition. And look, I think the three names you mentioned, Brian, are the front runners. And there are three different tracks that Donald Trump can choose. I mean, there's the political track, which I think Marco Rubio makes the most political sense. He's never lost an election in his political career. He's from a key state in Florida, and he could help Donald Trump really make inroads with Hispanic voters. And you saw Marco Rubio at the big rally that Trump held earlier in the week. I think Rubio definitely has an inside track.
Got it. Meanwhile, back on the board here, went back and looked at all the polling. If you smash them together over the last 20 years, we wanted to figure out who had a general lead on the July 4th weekend, okay? This is what we found. Going back to 2004, it was John Kerry with a 2-point lead over George Bush. 2008, Barack Obama, 4 points over John McCain. 4 years later, again, Obama, 2.5 points over Mitt Romney. In 2016, Trump trailed Hillary Clinton by 4.7 percentage points. But in 2020, Joe Biden had an easy lead in the polling over Donald Trump. In the throes of COVID we were in that summer, and the aftermath of George Floyd, Joe Biden had a 9-point lead. Right now, it's the first time in 20 years that a Republican after the 4th of July has had a lead in the polling. Trump with that advantage right now, 3.3.
Trump himself has branded these charges as election interference as ordered by the Biden administration. But let's go ahead and dig just a little bit deeper into what the Supreme Court decision will do in this Georgia case. But before we do, all I ask is that you take a second, hit the like button for the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for sharing these videos. You guys always help me out a lot, so thank you.
You're certainly at least going to get arguments about that, about whether there is immunity in the Georgia case.
Emory Law School professor Jonathan Nash spent the day combing through the Supreme Court's landmark decision Monday that former presidents are immune from the law if they're acting in an official capacity.
The court says there are certain things that lie within the core sphere of presidential authority.
But Professor Nash says the court did not offer any legal immunity for former President Trump's unofficial acts.
Setting up a scheme of fake electors is not something that the Constitution directly calls for.
And now the fate of former President Trump's legal troubles in Georgia, federally and elsewhere, hinges on what official means. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee must go through each of the former president's 10 alleged felonies and figure out if any are now void. That includes if Mr. Trump's now infamous phone call with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger pressuring him to flip the results was part of his presidential duties.
But the special counsel can't point to the president's motive. That's not something that can come into play. The action is either going to be sort of official or not official.
Professor Nash says that same metric will come into play in Georgia as well as in his federal cases. But the former president's RICO indictment in Fulton County has been at a standstill as the courts decide whether District Attorney Fani Willis should be off the case following her romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. That will have to be sorted out first in this case.
So that's all baked in already. This decision, I think, is going to give additional grounds for the president and who knows, maybe other litigants to make additional arguments to have certain counts thrown out, claims of immunity.
And on top of all of this uncertainty we're seeing at the federal level with those cases, he says that this case could take years to ultimately go before a jury. Meanwhile, we did reach out to DA Fani Willis's office for comment, but they declined at this point.
They raise a very good point here, guys. It's almost hard to define what an official act is, especially if it's done during one's presidential term. The idea is that if the act is not illegal, it should be counted as an official act. So in this case, it could be the intent of former President Donald Trump to keep the credibility of the election, to question whether the count was wrong. And as we all know, a lot of shady things have been going on in Georgia where some ballots were found to have been scanned twice. This was during the 2020 presidential election, which vindicates Donald Trump because it seems that there was in fact some funny business going on over there. It's possible that the lower courts find Donald Trump's actions to be an official one, as evidence suggests that he was right. Many experts believe that it would be very difficult to differentiate a personal act from an official one, especially when you consider that most of these actions were made under the First Amendment, that the president had a right to question the elections so long as it falls under the freedom of speech. Now, with this Georgia case, there's a lot to consider here. The High Court has already said that former president is presumptively immune from being prosecuted for his contacts with then Vice President Mike Pence. Now, as you guys may remember, Donald Trump contacted the VP right before the J6 Capitol riot. So the communication between the two are also referenced in the Georgia case. The expectation is that Donald Trump's team will have the Georgia case dismissed on the grounds of immunity with a subsequent hearing to follow. While the contact with Mike Pence was decided on by the Supreme Court, the contact with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has not been confirmed to be a part of his official acts. But it's pretty clear that the Supreme Court is saying something here when it comes to presidential immunity and Donald Trump's actions during January 6th.
In a 6-3 opinion, the Supreme Court ruled Monday that former presidents have absolute immunity from prosecution for official acts related to their core constitutional powers. But the court said there is no immunity for unofficial acts and gave some guidance on how lower courts can draw that line.
For those things that are just within the president's ambit, absolute immunity. For official acts in general, at least presumptive immunity. For unofficial acts, no immunity.
Former President Donald Trump has repeatedly argued that he had absolute immunity.
You have to give a president full and total immunity.
In a scathing dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote about the potential dangers of this decision on U.S. democracy. The ruling affects Special Counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of Trump for election interference for his role in the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. The case now goes back to the lower court.
So this is another problem for DA Fani Willis. It's not like she hasn't had a lot of these in the past few months. Just the delays within Donald Trump's different cases have been hailed as wins, as the outlook is pretty clear. These prosecutors are now fearing the worst. The worst is that Donald Trump wins in the 2024 presidential election, which might mean that all of these cases against him would be removed. It could also call into action investigations into what these same people have been doing behind the scenes. We know for a fact that some have called Fani Willis corrupt, both in the courtroom and outside of it, which is some pretty heavy allegations, both of which having some sort of evidence behind them. But there's even more bad news for Fani Willis, as her Republican challenger is gaining traction in Fulton County. Courtney Kramer, who used to work in the Donald Trump White House and Trump campaign, well, she's getting a lot of donations for her run. Her new campaign finance data shows that Kramer raised $46,641 between May and July, which brings her campaign's total contributions to almost $73,000. Now, this is almost double the $26,000 that she raised back in March and April. Fani Willis has yet to release the latest fundraising numbers, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot bigger compared to Kramer's. The main difference is that Fani Willis has practically been campaigning for the last 2 years. The Republican nominee has been in the race for only a few months. So Kramer has also been outspoken about Fani Willis and her case against former President Donald Trump. She called the DA's office as a disgrace to the legal community immunity and told news outlets that it's disgusting to see Fani Willis not follow her rules of professional conduct or take her oath of office seriously. But it doesn't change the fact that Fulton County is heavily Democratic, although the antics of Fani Willis may change the course of the elections. A lot of residents are now tired of their continued allegations of corruption against the DA and the Georgia justice system. But what do you guys think? Will the DA be removed from Donald Trump's case? And will this case be thrown out due to presidential immunity? Now, speaking of presidents, let's talk a little bit about President Biden. The incumbent president just went viral after seemingly ignoring a young black girl who he kind of set aside from his supporters. Now, I did a video on this one, guys. If you guys want to see that viral video, hit the link down below where I discuss this in more detail together with the embarrassing moment from the First Lady Joe Biden. But let me tell you something, guys. She is dedicated to keeping Joe Biden in the White House. So make sure you guys check that out. And before I go, thank you guys so much for hitting the like button and subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next one.